Hey guys, welcome to the video. My name is Dean Samad and you're tuned in to photomanipulation.com. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you my techniques for selectively editing elements using mask layers, creating cyber panels with catch lights, and combining photo stocks with CG elements to create epic sci-fi composites in Photoshop. This is an intermediate to advanced tutorial, so I won't be going into full details, explaining layer masks and adjustment layers, etc. This is more of an overview of the major techniques used in this piece. If you're new here, this channel specialises in advanced photo manipulation techniques, tutorials and crazy Photoshop work, so if that's your bag, be sure to like and subscribe as we put out 5 videos a week. Let's roll the video, enjoy. So we're underway. The first thing that I'm doing here is adding a levels adjustment layer to brighten the overall image. I just needed it to be temporarily brightened as I'm creating what I like to call mask layers on separate layers. So the first one is the solid mask, an outline of the girl, just the girl. And then that will be filled with white on a new layer. As you can see to the right on the layer stack, it's called Girl Solid Mask, and that is a mask layer. And as the tutorial progresses, we'll be referring back to and using these selections to selectively edit all the different elements of the composite. Here, just a freehand lasso tool for doing the same for the hair, so it's its own layer. Fill that with white, and then the reason that we're doing this is because we're going to go back and we're going to use those for selectively editing different parts of the composite. So I actually tried to composite the hair, but I realised I was ahead of myself, so that was a mistake. I turned the levels adjustment layer back on just to brighten things up, and going ahead and creating a wire mask. And this will be the same principle as the solid and the hair. Brand new layer, girl wire mask with the pen tool, tracing around just the wires and then filling that with white. And a bit of time-lapse magic there. I'm going to zip around, create a selection around the outside of the wires, and then remove all the gaps and holes. So we'll let that chug along. This is the most labor intensive part of the overall artwork, is creating these mask layers. And this part here, I believe, is cutting out and removing all of the holes, so all that will be left is a white mask layer that covers just the wires. So if we want to change the color, change the brightness, change the darkness, we can do that at any time simply by going Command and click on that layer, and that will create a selection based on that layer. If you're on a Windows, that's Control and click. A new layer has been created here, and we're repeating the exact same process as before, and this one is called Girl Hand Mask. So just the hands we want for this one. So if we want to selectively edit the hands, and we jump forward here, as before, we're doing the same for the lips. So we've got hair, solid, hands, wires, lips. And now what we're doing is we're using a hue saturation adjustment layer to selectively edit the lips. So a selection was made based on that mask layer, and then a new adjustment layer was created to selectively color those lips, and we can tweak the saturation or anything else. Okay, here's the main visor. So that's been cut out using the pen tool. and positioned in place using free transform. That's Command and T or Control and T on a Windows. A bit of positioning, get that in place. And you'll notice that the mask is not perfectly symmetrical, and I thought for this case just delete half of it, duplicate that by going Command and J, Control and J on a Windows, and then positioning the duplicate and merging that down with Command and E. Bring the opacity down just to make sure it's in the right position over the eyes. Take a look, see how it's going. Okay, to darken the visor, simply created a duplicate, Command and J, and then created a selection, brought the hue and saturation down, so that's darker with a lower saturation. And the saturation was applied using an adjustment layer. Some final tweaks with Edit Transform, or Free Transform should I say. And we're looking good on the mask. Now I believe coming up we may have a bit of shadow action here, and the process that I'm using for creating the shadow here is used right throughout this tutorial. So it's an adjustment layer, levels, you bring the levels down, use the bottom slider, and then I created a selection based on the visor, Command and click the layer icon, and then filled the levels adjustment layer with white, put it behind the visor, and then nudged it down a couple of steps, and then apply a Gaussian blur. Really fast, really quick and dirty way of doing instant shadows. And the reason why I believe this is better than like using a dark tone and a soft edge brush is because the levels are working with the existing values. A lot of people when they're starting out use just black brushes, but the black desaturates and kind of makes the pixel information degraded. It's always good for shadows and dark tones to use something other than black. For my purposes, levels works really well. So a bit of housekeeping there with the layer groups. This is going to be a big old chunky PSD, so using layer groups I've found is essential just to get a grip on all those different elements. And here we have a headphone element taken from a stock image, was cut out using a pen tool, and then positioned using Free Transform, Command and T, Mac, Control and T, Windows. And you'll notice that the headphone is being tweaked and rotated inside the layer group, and the layer group had the wires and the hands removed by filling those areas with black. So those masks that we created at the beginning, we're already using them to selectively composite these elements. So the illusion of the headphones being behind the wires is because they're in a layer group and the wires and the hands have been put into place. The wires and the hands have been filled with black, and that's what creates the illusion of the headphones being behind the wires. So we're doing a couple of tweaks here. Bit of skin processing. Zoom in, zoom out, see how we're doing. Get a feel for the overall composition. Again, you can see that that mask layer that we created, that filled white that covers the wires, created a selection on that by command and clicking the layer icon. There you go, you can see it there. And then when you add the adjustment layer, it uses that selection as the mask for the adjustment layer. So instantly I have changed the color of just the wires because of the work that was done before. Instant darken of those wires by duplicating the wire layer and changing that to multiply. Okay, on this bit here, there's a photo stock from Adobe stock of a CG asset, an android face. I really liked the lines and the details on the face, so what I'm going to do is basically just steal that as opposed to illustrating it myself. I have the stock image, and as well as stealing the lines on the face, I'm also going to steal the robotic elements. So these over details here, simply creating a path. So using the pen tool to create selections around these over elements, and then we'll copy and paste them onto a layer above. So that would be create the selection and then Command and J, and that will copy and paste that selection above. Here you can see I've created a mask layer again, and then all of that stuff goes into a layer group and then drag that over. Reduce the opacity, a bit of positioning with free transform. Get that into place. And then here you can see those over elements that were removed or copied are now being independently tweaked and positioned on the actual composite itself. And those selections, mask layers, really do come in handy. And the reason why this style of work looks really sharp is because of those precise pen tool selections. It's the reason why my name is listed as the Hyper Realist. So this is basically just a bit of cleanup, removing the elements that are clashing. Down at the bottom, those wires are kind of a bit jumbled and don't look too great. These wires here, I wanted them to go underneath, so we're using the layer masks on the layer group to selectively hide and show the different elements that are now starting to interact with each other. So selections are created using either the lasso tool L or the marquee tool M. And here you see I'm mainly using the pen tool to create those precise selections. The droid face has its own layer group. Bit of tweaking with free transform. And on this, I did the levels directly to the layer itself, as opposed to using an adjustment layer. With a layer mask on the droid face, just using a black soft edge brush, just to paint away the darks and the shades, just leaving the black lines and that reflective part on the right side of the face. I quite like that. So I left that there without painting it out with the layer mask. Getting rid of some last scrappy little bits, bit of tidying up. And then the skin processing, I wanted the face to be even more porcelain, to be even more white. So we have that adjustment layer in place, controlling the tones of the face. I'm just going to pull the hue saturation back just a touch. And because we have all of those selections saved, at any point editing selectively is a breeze. It's really easy. For this particular piece, those original masks, they're referred to and used all the time. Darkening the over elements, the electronic elements. And this is a shadow. So the same trick as before with the visor. Create a selection based on the electronic elements, fill a levels adjustment layer with white, blur it just a touch with Gaussian blur, position it underneath the elements that you want to be casting the shadow, and then just nudge it down a couple of notches with the move tool, which is V, keyboard shortcut. And this is the part where the over elements were darkened. Duplicated the layer, Command J, and then set that duplicate to multiply and instantly darkened those elements. Okay, so on this bit here, my intention was to take the upper torso and neck from this CG element, for one of the CG elements from our library on Neo stock, and I was going to use that, replace the body torso, and selectively edit the panels so it looked right. But you'll notice from the end result that this was actually scrapped. But I like to keep these parts in because no Photoshop composite is perfect from beginning to end. You're going to try some stuff, it's going to work, and then sometimes it doesn't work, and you may spend half an hour working on something and end up ditching it because it doesn't fulfill your needs or what you'd like the piece to become. So I always like to keep this in because it shows you an accurate representation of the creative process. Okay, the gel base layer has been duplicated here because I wanted the skin to be less human. And a really fast and really easy way of doing this is opening up Camera Raw filter, Camera Raw. On the duplicate of the original, you always want to keep a copy of the original just in case things go wrong. Gone to sharpening, gone to noise reduction, luminance, turn that up, and then turn luminous detail down, and on top of that add in just a touch of grain so it's not too plasticky and synthetic. You'll notice that that's also been applied to the lips and the gums and teeth, and you'll see we can use the mask layers that were made at the beginning of the project. Just command and click the layer icon and then delete as necessary. So I want the whole mouth. I'm going to add to the selection with the lasso, L, and then hit delete, and that's got rid of the skin softening on the lips and the mouth. It's quite sharp and it's quite synthetic, but we can tweak that at any time using filter Gaussian blur. You'll notice here that with the layer mask I'm removing the skin soften from the shadow underneath the nose, and that's just adds a little bit more finesse and detail, and that the bottom of the nose isn't just blurring in and blending in with the rest of the face. And a little bit of tidying up, removing the skin soften from the hair, And we're getting there, we're looking pretty good. So now we're just going to do a bit of stylization on the hair. Oil paint can often work really well as a filter on creating a more painterly aesthetic with hair strands. Make it look stylized and hyper real. So every so often I like to create a new layer and selectively apply the oil paint to just the hair to get real nice synthetic looking strands. And you'll see here that new layer that I created and applied the oil paint filter, simply selectively painting it in using the layer mask with a soft edge brush set to foreground color white. And at any time you can switch the foreground and background colors using X on your keyboard. So we've stylized the hair, taking a look, a little zoom out, zoom in, see what needs to be done next. You'll notice we're always referring back to those mask layers. Okay, some shadow action here. So the same trick as before, the same trick you'll see in a lot of my tutorials. A levels adjustment layer, bring the output levels down, usually output levels, invert to black, then selectively painting with a soft edge brush set to white. And for this bit I believe it's just a bit of light shaping to bring the focal point of the eye into the center of the image. It's like a vignette to taper that light inwards and to push the focus and attention to the center of the image. There's a few gaps here and there with these wires, so on a new layer, right at the bottom of the layer stack, just adding some little elements to join the wires to the neck parts. I believe I scrapped all this in the end because I got rid of that torso and the neck elements, but at this stage I thought that I didn't like where they didn't connect properly, so simply created a path and then filled that, I think, with black, or yeah, just black, because it's so tiny it doesn't matter if you use black for something like that. By the way, that's just force of habit, manually zooming in and out with the magnifier tool. You can just use Command plus and minus to zoom in and out as a keyboard shortcut. And for you Windows guys, that's just Control. Anytime I say Command, just replace it with Control. Again, going back to the lips, using that mask layer to create the selection, and then adjustment layers, either levels, hue or saturation, hue and saturation, to get the depth and the tone that I want. So I didn't want it too shocking and too vivid, but I did like the lips to be darker. Those blue lights on the headphones would be emitting, I wanted them to emit a bit of a glow. So I created a selection around just the lights with a lasso tool, L, and duplicated that selection, Command J, and then tweaked the levels so it's just the lights showing, pulled the black slider to the right, and then with that duplicate layer apply a Gaussian blur to blur just those circular elements and set that duplicate layer to screen. Screens are a really good layer mode if you want to create lighting effects, and it's a go-to for me quite often using the screen. And to increase the brightness of these kind of LED lights on the headphones, you can just duplicate the layers and then continue to add Gaussian blurs as much as you need to create the right level of spread and brightness that you want for your lights. Later on the video, I actually use a soft edge brush to manually paint on 2 blues and change that layer blend mode to soft light, just to add even more of a emitted blue haze. So this is a bit of a process. You go back and forth, you add layers, you remove layers, you tweak the opacity, you tweak the Gaussian blur, and you keep repeating it until you get the result that you like. Just pulled the saturation of that visor down a touch, created a selection on the visor, and then hue saturation adjustment layer. What we've bounced into here is one of the folders for our new cables pack, and I want to grab a couple of elements or an element or two and incorporate it into the image and take the kind of cyberpunk styling up to the next level. So these CG tubes that we created will be incorporated now and added to the figure. So this one was a no-brainer. I saw the shape and thought, yeah, that would look great. To darken that, the same trick that I've used quite a few times in this video now. Duplicate the layer, set to multiply, and it's an instant darken. Looks quite pleasing. And then with the other tubes, moving and positioning with transform, darkening them by duplicating the layer and changing it to multiply, and then any shadows using the levels trick, create a selection based on the tube, and then painting the darken with the levels adjustment layer. Another folder from our pack, the CG cables pack. These ones are custom rendered ZBrush CG assets. They were made specifically, created specifically for cyber artwork like this. So I'll grab the selection out of that folder, and as before with the CG tubes, just a case of free transforming, positioning. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's not right. Darkening where necessary, adding shadows where necessary. This is the easy part in comparison to the compositing, is because the assets are PNG, I don't have to spend ages cutting them out. It's all drag and drop, all really nice and easy, made specifically for photo manipulation work. So this part of the process really is the fun part. Well, it depends what you're into, really. I personally find the pen tool compositing quite fun. If you've seen my other video series, the pen tool challenge, you'll see how much fun I have compositing elements with the pen tool. But this is all drag and drop simplicity. Now, I wanted to use loads of different cables and loads of different wires from our bundle. Our cable bundle has a couple of hundred assets in it. But then I had to kind of hold myself back and think, are you just including it for the sake of it, and is it going to work? There is such thing as going OTT, doing too much and having it too cluttered. If the eye doesn't have clearly defined focal points to lock onto, then the piece isn't as successful, doesn't have that same compositional impact. Nice easy trick to create backlighting. Just use the shape tool, U on the keyboard shortcut, create a ellipse, just a circle, and then filter blur, Gaussian blur, and that adds a real nice bit of backlight behind the figure. Then we're going to be, this is the little mini glows. Just 2 splodges with a paintbrush using the blue. Changed that to, I tried overlay but it weren't right. Just changed it to soft light. Just adds just a tiny bit of light glow to those Gaussian blur layers we added earlier on. Tweaking the lighting of the wires. All simple stuff. Levels for shadows, levels for controlling the kind of brightness and contrast. I'm a bit of a levels guy. A lot of my colleagues on photomanipulation.com like their curves, but for some reason I'm a levels guy. Okay, this is the bit where I got rid of the old torso, and I thought, well, this torso from this stock image from Adobe Stock, I've had this one for a while, and I just thought the colors of those panels and the kind of robotics looks a bit better than what I had before, so I incorporated this one, brought this one in. And it's just a case of plonking it into the droid body layer group and then positioning it and getting the neck to be the right size. And once this is positioned and in place, just a basic shadow created using the same technique as before. There I was selectively darkening the shoulders. Using the pen tool to selectively cut away wires or elements that I don't want or need. This is the shadow being created now for the chin that's being cast onto the mechanical elements below. It's a nice fun bit here. So we stole the lines from the CG stock photo, but they're, because it's set to multiply, the highlights aren't really all that prominent. So what I'm doing here is creating a path with the pen tool and just tracing along the line where the catch light will be. And you see from the original source image, you can actually see the catch light there. So a straight path created with a pen tool, select brush, change the width of the brush to the width that you'd like the highlight to be. I left the hardness at 0%, so just brought the brush size down, and then we go stroke path, choose brush, and it's too thick. So you hit B, bring the size down a bit, and then try again. And that's a lot better. Change that to overlay so it's not as stark or even soft light. And then I believe instead of using a layer mask here, I just grabbed an eraser, E, and then just tapered out the edges so it looked a bit more natural and organic. And this process that I went through for this highlight on the panel, I go through and I repeat for the other sections where it's applicable. So creating the path, stroking the path with a narrow brush, and then I think for the other ones I decided to go with a layer mask just in case I made a mistake. It's a smarter way to work, non-destructive. And there the highlights have been put in place. I believe they were all on one layer. And they're just bringing the wire shadows above so they're cast onto the new mechanical torso. I really do love doing cyberpunk art like this. I'm going to be doing lots more. I'll be doing a homage to Cyberpunk 2077. Get some heat from that when we launched that video. So the main composite, the Cybergirl's face with the panels and the wire elements are the main aspect of this walkthrough and tutorial. So a lot of the stuff that's happening now onwards would be final tweaks, some global processing, and the speed will kick in soon. The speed will kick in and it'll go fast through the post-processing, because I want to do videos fully dedicated to post-processing. So another gallery within the Ultimate Cable bundle. This time it's the perennial sci-fi favourite ribbed tubes. We've got a load of foreground tubes in there. Same techniques as before. Pull them in, transform as necessary, control the tones, and here you can see an image was incorporated for the background. So my day job, I am a book cover illustrator and I do this professionally. So I have access to Adobe stock. So I have a lot of really nice stock images, because I own and operate a stock photography website myself, Neo Stock. I have a really good selection there to choose from as well. That's where the cable bundles come from. But in my day-to-day work, I use a combination of both. I'll use Adobe stock and I'll use the stock elements that we've created, because the stock elements that we've created were made specifically for photo manipulation work. So a lot of times the background's already knocked out. They're PNG or they're specialist CG elements that have been created for the purpose of making cyberpunk art or making horror art, anything like that. I didn't like the background image, so I stole another one from Adobe stock. I'll make sure I link all of these in the description below. And this is the final stretch for the post-processing. So I'm just adding some lights here and there, using the same tricks as before. Soft edge brushes, ellipses, changed to different layers, different layer blend modes. And a little final touch here, I had a stock photo of a robotic scene. I thought, okay, I'll just take that small element there, remove it using the pen tool, and then position with transform and get that in place, just to add a little bit more of a futuristic flourish to that visor. The process that I went through there, we've actually done a video on that. It's called a better way to create an oil paint effect, and that adds a final sheen and takes the sharp photographic edge off the final image. And what I usually like to do on a stamped layer is do a global process using the camera raw filter, which is great. I use camera raw filter all the time, and especially for final post-processing. And there we have it, the end of the time-lapse tutorial. Time really does fly when you're having fun. I've put all the links for the stock images used in this piece below, so you can grab them if you need them. That's it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I'll catch you at the next video. See you then.